Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to season 2 of Conversations in Pop Culture. And before I continue, there are links up above or down below, depending on where you're looking, that you could actually support my guest and his Kickstarter, as well as you could buy me a coffee because, well, gotta support indie content creators. But even more importantly than all of that, please share this interview all around. It is super important. And so, without further ado, let me introduce comic creator and writer Ajayi, also known as Charles. Hopefully, I got the name right.
It's
Hopefully.
perfect.
So, welcome to
Perfect.
the show because obviously you got a lot going on.
Yes, sir. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no, I am very exciting. And obviously, I sort of alluded to your Kickstarter, and you have O Kingdom Come, which is your Kickstarter. And obviously, it's very interesting. So, what is the comic about? I think is the best place to start.
Of course, yeah. Okina Come follows the Nile kingdoms along the valley that were both struggling for power and struggling for control of the Nile because the Nile had a lot of trade routes. It had a lot of military importance for location-wise, and a lot of the religions had a spiritual reason to want to control the Nile. So it's about the kingdoms that were fighting for control of the Nile pre-ancient African times.
And so let's dive into it because I am super curious because there's a lot of moving parts. So where did the inspiration for this come from? Because obviously there's a million areas it could have come from. And so I'm super curious, where did all that come from? Because this is interesting.
Yeah. So with most, I've been writing since I was like a kid. So most things when I'm writing them, it's like an image that sticks out particularly. And I had a really cool image of like just a guy impaled by a bunch of spears. And yeah, pretty dark childhood. Yeah, you know. But yeah, I had a pretty vivid image of a guy impaled by a dark spear, and then I usually try to make sense of that image, and then I kind of write something pretty good after that. Um, so this I was writing more around when Game of Thrones came out, and I was like, oh my, Game of Thrones is so good. Oh, I love Game of Thrones, and that I kind of went off of that what George did with the blood feud of 15th century, and I kind of just took that and just I have a whole other thing I can do with that. So it's not so much inspired by Game of Thrones because that's what everybody always says. Oh, like Game of Thrones. I'm like, no, it's not. Stop it. But that's usually the first reference people go to. So mostly whenever I write something, it's just some flash of the pan kind of thought, and then I try to make sense of it, and it comes out pretty decent.
And so I kind of tip my hat because there's a lot of stuff going on. I do want to get into a bunch of it and dive a
Of
little
course.
bit into the weeds. But when you're writing about ancient civilization, and I know a little bit about ancient civilization, I took world history in college. I took world
Oh, very
history
cool.
part two. I took, a class all about slavery dating back all the way into ancient times, into
Yeah,
modern times. And so obviously, and that encompasses a variety of cultures.
that's
And
right.
so what was all of this like to look it up?
It
Because
was awesome. It was so cool. There's so much stuff, and I'm like, what? How did no one do this? It was amazing. I grew up in Miami, and then I was moved around 10. I moved to Nigeria for high school. So growing up there, like you hear a lot of the folktale kind of stories, and then you come back here and you're like, what is like this huge culture shock? So I went off of that as well, just learning from different cultures. And then I did a ton of research, which was really exciting because it's interesting stuff. It's not like boring. It's like really interesting. The the Kondekas and all the kings and all that. It was amazing. So um, I had some researchers look over it because I actually wrote it like cinematically first, and they're like, "Yo, this is really compelling stuff." And that's when I was like, "Oh, you know, I'm gonna go the graphic novel route. Let's see how it goes." After that.
yeah, and to even dive into that, because obviously ancient history, and I think it's ancient history, and I don't mean to like play down even because oh that's
Of
ancient
course.
history. It's
Yeah,
this idea that there's a lot of stuff that
a
happened
lot. That's right.
across the world, and also some of it conflicts each other, and then
Mm-hmm.
there's a variety of other stuff, and then there's also the question is that did this really happen to some
Yep.
degree as well, and even just getting the mindset of it because obviously, I mean, if you go back to Mesopotamia, it's
Hmm.
kind of like beer was invented there. And it's insane when you start diving down the rabbit hole. And I'm not an expert by it by any means. And
Of
then,
course.
so nobody better quote me. You're probably more the expert than I am. But what is that like? And even just saying, hey, I'm doing something and it needs to now be up to a certain standard
Of
because
course. And
fuck it up, it's gonna be bad.
that's yeah, that's the best part because it's more like a mind state. So you got to think about there's no internet, there's no people weren't sending telegrams. Oh, this is what's happening in Rome in this year. People were living very much in their own bubbles, and that was civilization to them. So in these different pockets all over the world, people were living what their version of civilization was. Um, Very rarely would they have that kind of interaction, and something huge would happen when there was an interaction between Rome and North Africa or Morocco or something like that. So that actually gave me leeway to say what a story would be like here. People that don't know what the hell's going on across the seas or down below, that what would be happening here. To them, the Nile is everything. So what would be happening in this moment to them in the Nile? So that actually gave me a lot of leeway to not, you don't want to take everything. They're not going to know what's happening in Rome, you know. So you want to focus on what's particular to your story for sure.
Yeah, and the Nile is fascinating, and
Hmm.
it's really cool because obviously you have now a massive power struggle between these different tribes, and honestly, I mean, if we go forward into other comics and other things, I mean, a lot of this is very similar as
Yeah.
far as power struggle, fighting for resources, and obviously, what was that like introducing all these different kingdoms because they're all
Hmm.
fighting for control of the Nile, they're all fighting for sort of the heartland in many ways.
That's right.
And now, everybody's got a different view, a different tactic, and there's
Yeah.
obviously a lot of politics involved,
Hmm.
and a lot of stuff's going on with this. I
A
mean, it
lot.
is complicated. And I mean, it's no
Right.
different than today in a lot of ways.
It isn't. It isn't.
We as humans haven't changed. We just have better toys now.
That's right. And that's what I love. That's what I love. I was able to frame it to talk about a lot of stuff that's going to be very easy to relate to because it's still happening. Um, and the main kingdoms, and this is something I was really particular about growing up in West Africa. You want to be careful of just like throwing a tribe name or a type of kingdom on something in your story if you don't really know about it that much. So I really used the core identities of most of the more popular kingdoms, and I use that as these tribes. So the kingdom names will be different, or have a significance if you like Google it or whatever. In the first few pages on the actual website, the kingdom of Zari is trying to lay siege on them. So the Zari is not a real kingdom, but Zari stands for greed. So I use that to frame other identities from other tribes into it. So it'll be familiar to people that are from where these tribes are from, and it'll be familiar to people that understand any human greed or anything like that. So I use that to actually tell the story a lot easier.
So what is that like? Because obviously I am not an African tribe expert. I think if people knew, if I think people would be shocked if I was. It'd be a very interesting interview, I promise. But is this idea that I understand that certain things offend certain cultures, and I think most people do as well.
Hmm.
And so obviously, if you are doing a book that refers to a tribe,
Yeah,
you want to be very careful. And what is that like for you figuring out where I can walk the line, where I can't walk the line, what
exactly,
innuendo I can make? Because you wouldn't go into an Irish pub and not know which side of Ireland they were on in order a certain drink.
exactly,
Unless you want
exactly.
to be
That's
thrown out. Unless you want to be thrown out. If that's the case. I
yeah,
mean,
right.
what you on risk, right?
No, 100%. And that's what I avoided. I didn't use actual, at least anything that's happening negatively or anyway. I didn't use actual tribes. I used like a core identity that's very familiar to that tribe, so they'll know like, oh, that's what he's talking about. And I also use like their core identity, so someone that doesn't know about the tribe will be able to, like, let's say keep going Game of Thrones on this. The iron, what was it? The sails, the iron ships or whatever, right? It's called
Yeah,
the iron
something,
ship.
something like that. It's
So
been a while since I've seen Game of
yeah, so iron ship. So the assumption is what they sail quite a bit, and maybe they produce iron, so something like that. So that's basically what I did with these tribes. I didn't actually use actual tribes. I just used identities that are familiar or that are assigned to those tribes, and I used them as the actual tribe name. So I wouldn't be stepping on anyone's toes or anything like that. It came out a lot easier that way, and it's easier to follow.
Yeah, and also it's probably less offensive because
Yeah,
people can add their own layers into it if they would like to.
that's
First
right.
thing, it's the idea that I don't know how many people know African tribes. I am obviously not the guy who
Yeah,
knows African tribes, so I'm
hmm
going to read the book differently for somebody who knows African tribes.
exactly,
You know, is
exactly.
going to obviously say, "Oh, I know exactly what this is referring to," and it adds
Hmm.
another layer, and it's meant across the board, which is a nice tactic in writing in general.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
And so to talk about these kingdoms, because a lot of shit's going on in this book. And well, obviously these kingdoms are sort of fighting and vying for power. And there's also this entire thing where a bunch of people are going to be affected. And so we have a god that's going to be affected. And I'm probably going to get this name wrong. Uyas or Uyus?
Oh, so USA.
Usa.
So
Wow, I'm
yeah.
totally off
No,
base.
so, and that's funny, right? So like and it's so funny. It's so interesting that you said like USA, right? Because if you saw my name, like if I spell my name out Dimeji, if you say it the way it sounds, you're gonna nail it. But as soon as you try to apply, like, oh, someone used to call me Dimitri when I was in elementary school. Whenever you try to apply what you associate names that look similar to, that's when you'll get off. If you pronounce USA the way it looks, it's like two U's and an SA. You'd be like, USA, you know what I mean? So, yeah. So like USA, so USA is a very good example of like what we're doing with the naming conventions.
And so obviously Usa is a god, and it's obviously she. I'm assuming it's a she,
Yeah.
and she obviously has affiliations with a particular kingdom. And so, what
Hmm.
is that like? Because now, when kingdoms go to wars,
Yeah.
obviously, if you have a god, and if you want to conquer that kingdom, you got to go kill that god to some degree, and then
Correct.
where that god's lending strength, and it gives an advantage, where maybe that guy can't lend strength in particular, and it creates a whole power dynamic. And so obviously now we're adding layers into this.
That's right. So Usos is very interesting. So the area that they are, the aboriginals of that area, she's from that tribe. So which is the Medu Neter, which is the oldest language in along the Nile. So she's from the Medu tribe, but she's loyal to the kingdom that's come after it. So she has a bit of power to her because they know that she's like one of the first families, like Rockefeller, Rothschilds. I don't know how I was gonna say Rockefeller. The Rothschilds. They have a lot of respect in the states, right? Or the Kennedys. Something along those lines, where her family, her tribe, has this old history with this area. Even though the kingdom that's come in is new, which is this new kingdom, she's loyal to the kingdom, but to the people they respect her will, so to say. They respect her will and whatever she said if she wanted to go that route. But she's, as of right now, she's loyal to that kingdom.
And well, loyalties can change.
Yeah,
I'm gonna tease that
that's
right
right.
in there.
Things can change.
And so obviously when this kingdom is going to war, obviously she has respect, and so now she in many ways is viewed as a leader, a thought leader. Her opinion matters, her opinion
Right.
has influence, and it creates a very interesting circumstance, especially as things begin to change and well casualties start stacking up, and
That's
whether
right.
this kingdom is winning or losing can obviously change opinion about her and what she grants. And so obviously there's a lot to play with that. And I'm not going
That's
to push
right.
too hard into that.
No, there's plenty of room to play with, to play things there. Uh, yeah, yeah, that's you're right. Trying to see how far I could take that one. Like that would go beyond this book.
And then obviously there's a bunch of other characters that I want to
Yeah,
dive into. And there's obviously
right.
Mawu, I
Hmm.
think.
Yeah,
I think I got it right. They're also known as Moon Wanderer. And so obviously he's doing something that's fascinating with this book too.
yeah. So Mao was like he's a albino, so they don't come across those all the time. and he has no recollection of his past. So he's who we're kind of going through the book. We're looking through his eyes to figure out what's going on here. But he's while we're on that journey with him, he's going to start figuring out things that he couldn't remember before. They call him Moon Wanderer because he's pale as the moon. And they think he'd make great target practice. If they wanted to, if they wanted to lay siege, they send him out first to see if, since he sticks out more than the other soldiers. Yeah, we're going to be learning a lot about his past along the book as well. We'll be seeing it through his eyes.
And then obviously maybe a foil and a very interesting another character is Prince Ajayi.
Yep, Prince Ajayi.
And so obviously there's some honor restoration involved with this character. And,
Correct.
you know, clearly there's something going on with this kingdom and obviously all that stuff and perhaps a father issue or perhaps a past mess up where, you know, or perhaps something is bigger where, you know, honor is lost and, well, if you win a war or you gain land or you gain resource or you gain control,
That's
honor
right.
is restored. And obviously that is something very interesting. And that opens up a lot of stuff too because obviously brash decisions can happen when you want to restore your honor. You know, choices that
correct.
Characters, you know, obviously, you know, the idea of aggression can come out in a lot of ways. And so what is this like having this character? Because this can act, and obviously we're going to, I think, talk about his father in a second here.
So yeah, Prince Adaya's kingdom is where Zari has taken over. So Zari took over his kingdom, and he was not equipped to stop their siege. So he decided to surrender to save his people and fight under them. So he's commanding the Zari army. So honor has been lost for his family that were, you know, the rulers of this land. But he's doing what he can to restore that honor by fighting under Zari currently.
And so what is that like? Because obviously, you know, now you're sort of leading your enemy's troops, but you're also in a position of power. And it's a very weird circumstance because, well, this kingdom's in a war and the Zarya kingdom's in a war.
Yeah.
And traitor among us, maybe?
It could be when there's a lot of people under your control, you'll be surprised the kind of things you'll do that will make you kind of neuter to make sure everybody stays safe. So he does have plans, but in the meantime, he's gonna try and get Zari in a better position before he can get in wait for the right moment to take advantage of it.
And in case anybody hasn't figured it out, there's a lot of moving pieces here.
Yeah.
We have a crazy setting where people are all fighting for control of a resource that is very advantageous, just without any military implications. And I'm still assuming that these kingdoms have to fend off other issues. Just because you're in an isolated bubble doesn't mean that, you know, people aren't trying to come into their territory. There's not an issue of other tribes on other parts of Africa or even the East coming in as well. I mean, world history is very, very complicated. I don't know where this is as far as the Crusades or any other major global war implications.
It would be it'd be before that because you have to think about it like the Kingdom of Benin. Now the Kingdom of Benin was migrated from the Nile, and when Portugal came to Benin, they were surprised to see street lamps they already had street lamps, and that was the 14th century. So they were using palm oil to power their street lamps. So this is going to talk about a lot of this. I got a lot of room because we, as like normally, because of the way we learn, we assume things progressed like in an increment manner, and there was actually exponential growth and time lost, inventions lost, all kinds of stuff that were lost. Another thing that stuck out to me is I was talking to my grandmother, and she told me about how they used to give birth like a century ago. They had this weird contraption on the wall that they'd have the woman hold and just squat, and there would be no blood, there'd be no tears. It was like a perfect method to give birth. So like all that stuff is like fascinating because that stuff's forgotten. It's gone. Like nobody knows how to do that anymore. Like all that and so that's the kind of stuff I want to play with. That just because things haven't progressed incrementally doesn't mean they never existed. So yeah, it's gonna be a real fun ride for sure.
And the reason why I bring this up is because obviously, there's a whole thing where obviously all these kingdoms are fighting each other,
Hmm.
and obviously kingdoms are going to fall, kingdoms are going to rise
Yeah,
in the process, and new kingdoms might even be broken out of the things that fall. But
that's right.
obviously, there's still external pressures, there's pressures within, and it's a very, very complicated web you're weaving because
Yes,
there's a lot of stuff that can happen, and obviously this is almost more political than bloodshed. Obviously, there's a lot of bloodshed in it. It's a very
a
gritty.
lot of bloodshed. So that's where it's going to be there's a little bit of a tweak. So if you look at, and we're going to like a political part of Africa. If you look at politics on the continent currently, they're so different than politics here. Oh my God. I don't know if you've ever seen like a YouTube video of Parliament, people like running and like wrestling.
I'll tell a
Like,
quick story. I'll tell a quick story. So my dad went to Kenya,
oh, cool.
and he went during the entire incident for photography, and he went when there was that entire issue with like all the protests about their prime minister or their
Oh
president.
no,
So,
the
yeah,
timing.
it's so no. He was fine. He enjoyed his trip, but he's in his hotel and they have like armed guards outside the hotel, and it's like right next to the hotel. Like they're all doing it, and he was safe. If you're an American in Kenya going tourism wise, you're relatively safe if you don't go
Correct.
into the bad parts.
Yeah.
And I say this very nicely, but the idea is that it's very different. Where in America, because I used to live in Washington D.C., there's a protest every day in Washington
It's
D.C.,
nothing. Yeah, not a big deal there.
but it's also very, very civil in a lot of ways.
Hmm.
And so it's kind of crazy the states versus that. But obviously, when you have a military war comic, politics and war go hand in hand. No question
Correct.
about it.
100%. Yeah. 100%. And I've always said this. It's the politics we have like, and this is like going to come to off the rail here, but I'm sure you see any complaint about pretty much the African nations is our leaders. Our leaders are pretty much greedy, lazy, old.
Corrupt. Corrupt is a
Corrupt,
good
corrupt.
word.
Oh, how can I forget that? Oh yeah, that's the big one. But yeah, greedy, lazy, old, corrupt. These things. This is a lot of the issue. We don't have so much of the baggage. A lot of more advanced or more new democratic civilizations have that. There's so much baggage that's come with their democracy that our problems are actually quite simple in comparison to places that are more civil, like you said. So it's very interesting that we have more simple problems in comparison, but it's such a bigger mess. It's like just a huge mess over there. So yeah, so the politics will be there, but just like the way it is now, that the problems are pretty simple. They won't overtake the story that much. There's always going to be betrayal. There's always going to be someone looking to get one up on another person or another opponent. A big thing in Africa is jailing your opponents when they're running against you. Which, what? Yes, that's a big thing too. But yeah, it's not nearly the politics, and this is me, and this is great why I wrote this, and because I can explain this better than someone else from there only, than me living here and living there. Um, the politics here, in comparison to there, the complications are just too wide. The complications are huge. There's so many layers of with politics of issues, like filibuster, campaign funding, just like before even getting into more important things. So yeah, so that's very exciting to even show that part. And I'm glad you brought that up. That to even show that level of it between these kingdoms, because that's very, very close to what they're experiencing now.
Even just whenever you're dealing with military operations,
Yeah,
obviously, you know, we have the prince. He's in a position where he's a political position.
yeah,
And if you're a king leading your troops into battle, you're in a political position
yeah,
because you're a leader, you're the face of your nation. And so every action that all these kingdoms are taking and troops are taking, and if you highlight a commander, you know, for a panel, you know, that's obviously he's leading 25 troops or 150 troops. That's
yeah.
very much a political position,
Correct.
not because they're not dealing with politics the same way, that they're not all gathering around debating legislation,
Of
because
course.
their form of debate is, hey, I got a sword, you got a sword, and well, if you die, my problem's solved.
Yeah, yeah. That's
You know,
right.
if
And
the other king is
that's what
dead,
the famous
I win.
becomes.
As I was saying, if the other king dies, I win and I take your kingdom, and I take his
Hmm.
wife too, even though I have three already.
Yeah. Add them to the list.
Obviously, and we're kidding about that, but that probably happens actually more in
Yeah,
civilization
more than
anyway.
we think. Yeah.
And even going further, I think there's also Mata the Beast. Honor the
Hmm.
Beast is another character, and obviously, you know, we got honor, protect, and duty. So obviously, Mom Mata wants to protect his kingdom or her kingdom. I'm not sure what
Yeah.
gender Mata is.
Yeah. Imada. So that's so right now the point that of the story that we saw is the kingdom of Zari laying siege on Nubia, and Imada is the commander of Nubia. Usa is a commander under Nubia, and Zari is trying to come in and take through the walls. They call him the Beast because of all the stories that's been told about him in war. He's never fallen. He's never struck blood. Somebody hit him on the head with a sword and it sparked. There's like all these stories that these myths that come with with war that that have followed him. So they call him the Beast. So it's this big boogeyman of war. Um,
And so, what is it like having a character who is sort of? I think that it's fair to say that the main kingdom is Nubia,
yeah,
and sort of they're the ones who are defending. They sort of, I think, have the most control over the Nile at the
correct.
moment, and they don't have complete control, but they're the one to attack. Essentially, I
Hmm.
think is a good way to how to say it. And what is that like having, you know, a character who is sort of like the Iron Shield in a lot of ways,
That's
and
right. I like that you said that.
it's the saying is that, you know, it's the ultimate shield versus the ultimate spear, and
That's
Mata
right.
seems to be that ultimate shield type character and that ultimate defense barrier type character.
That's
And
right.
it is interesting because obviously, if you crack the ultimate defense, you know,
Everything else follows. That's right. Um, so Imada is also, yeah. So he's the commander of the Nubian army, the army that everyone's afraid of. Um, he was great because he really embodies what it would mean to take over Nubia. He's the embodiment of it. Um, he's the, oh, if that guy goes down, we're free and clear. Everything else is going to be a breeze. Uh, so so we used him as the embodiment of what it would mean if Nubia fell altogether, because the bigger message of all these kingdoms is of how Nubia is going to fall, because it falls. So so it's of how Nubia is going to fall. So does he go first?
to even talk about that, because we know Nubia is going to fall. I mean,
Yeah,
I don't think that's a secret. The
yeah,
question is that how is it going to fall? Who's going to take it? Who's going to die? Who's going to survive? Who's going to be encompassed in it? What is Nubia going to become? I think
hmm,
is the question with all this. And, you know, is Mata going to die, or is it going to be a peaceful surrender? Is it going to be carved out? Is it going to be that Nubia falls to some degree, but chunks of it form a resistance? Like, and there's a lot of stuff that can be played with. And so it's very interesting when you have a comic that says, hey, this kingdom is going to die.
yeah,
The question is that what happens next? And these other 4 or 5 kingdoms still want to kill each other.
yeah,
And once they capture Nubia, it's just a shift of them gaining a 15% edge, but they
hmm,
only have 35 or 40%. And then they still need to conquer the other 60%. Just to use an example, I
yeah,
don't know the full percentage as how much Nubia weighs in the equation, but it's the idea that none of these kingdoms want to just stop at Nubia.
Yeah. Yes, nobody wants to just stop there, but it seems like an impossible feat to do without control of Nubia. So they want to start with Nubia because it seems like there's no point in even trying to conquer anything if you don't have Nubia.
It's the shift. It's the shift. It's kind of like winning at Monopoly. You need boardwalk.
Yeah, that's right, 100%. So the Nubia has to be that's everyone's mindset. It's their obsession. And that's why I want it to be their absolute obsession, that they want this place, that everybody wants it. And it's the heartland of that Nile, the heartland of the trade, the heartland of everything. Everybody wants it. Everybody's doing everything they can to take it. And we'll have to see what happens, how it falls, how long it takes to fall. Will it be immediate? Is something that'll take over time? That's really where the heart of the entire story really is.
And then obviously even going further into this, because obviously this comic, as I stated, is gritty. It is bloody. It is a war-driven comic, without a doubt. There is a lot of stuff going on with it. And then also what's fascinating is that it's in black and white. At least part of it is. I think the
part of it
is in black and white. And then I think there's a color version as well.
Yes.
But what prompted black and white? Because black and white, I don't know how familiar you are with comics, but I'll have you read the X-Men book? I forget. I think it's Jim Lee's book. It's in color and it's in black and white. Have you read both of them?
I've not read the black and white, no.
So reading the black and white is a whole different comic than reading the colored version. It's kind of like reading Watchmen in black and white, or The Owls in black and white. Is very different than reading it in color. And it's a very different reading experience, and it's very cool where you get to see the line work. Now, I understand that reading The Walking Dead in black and white is different because it's always been in black and white, and obviously now they're doing it in color. Which
I saw that. Yeah.
really, really easy way to make a lot of money for Image. Really easy way. I have like the first 3 issues in color, and then I realized how expensive it was going to be, and I decided to back out of it. Thank God. It only took me 3 issues, everybody. It took me 3 issues.
Well done.
to figure it out, and I realized, oh, snap, this is a money hole.
It is.
But the idea is that what prompted the black and white version?
Oh, man. I saw, because I had a beautiful artist, Rama, I really saw that there's something about, because he kind of uses expressionism. He draws traditional and then scans. So the black and white just, with the expressionism that he added to the scenes, he really added like agony. You would see like he would like put scratches on the grass. That was more noticeable in black and white than in color. I saw that in color, kind of that part got muted out. Like you said, different viewing experience. But the emotional baggage that came with the black and white was just really fulfilling. So I definitely want to offer it as a tier to get it in black and white for sure.
And then obviously color, because there's a color version that's a little bit more pricey. And so, because at this point, if you're doing black and white and then you're also doing color, it's not anymore an expense problem, where some people do black and white because they don't want to hire a colorist. That's part of it sometimes. Sometimes, you know what it is? You say, hey, look, this looks awesome in black and white, and you make an executive decision saying, hey, you know, if we don't have to get it matte, if we don't have to get it colorist, and you're, as the, you know, artist, just start black and white grayscaling it essentially. It's cool, and it adds sometimes to the book's flavor.
That's right.
But that's not the case here. So what's the deal with the color version? Because
the color version, I figured it wasn't really a big, I didn't really overthink it. It was more of just variety. I know some people like colored comics, and some people, I really love the black and white. But I know that
are you just hitting all your bases pretty much?
Yeah, for the color, I wanted to make sure that there's variety for readers, make sure that there's something that they would have wanted. At least for the color, for sure. I really love the black and white.
Super weird. I'm going to tell you, and I know you're new to Kickstarter, it's very weird that somebody does a color version and a black and white version. I know people do highlight colors and do Sin City on black and whites, but I've never seen, and I've been doing this for like 7 years, that somebody did a black and white version and then a color version. I've seen people do a color version secondary, where they've done like a color version of the graphic novel after all 4 issues in black and white have come out. And that's why I'm so curious, because it is so different that there's two options to read
Yeah,
it.
and
And
they look so different. With them looking that different, I really wanted to make sure that people had the option to read it either way.
and so I find it super, super interesting in that regard. And I wanted to bring it up because obviously it's something that I haven't seen
Of
before.
course.
I'm sure other people have done it. I'm sure you're not the first. I'm sure you didn't invent
Yeah,
it.
I was thinking about that. I'm like, I'm pretty sure I saw it. I'm like, oh man, okay, cool. First,
But
but no, I'm
given
pretty sure I saw that one.
but given that I've done probably 150 Kickstarter interviews, give or take, in the last 7 years, I have not
Wow,
seen this. So obviously, this is new to
wow,
me.
that's amazing.
So,
Huh.
so it's super interesting to me in that regard. But
Yeah,
obviously, I think it's cool. I think choice is king in a lot of ways.
yes, sir. We go for that.
And so obviously, talking about choice, I don't want to push the story too far because I could probably get everything I want out of you and then some.
Yeah, you probably could. I already told you so much.
I just have
I'm like, are you CIA? What is this? An interrogation?
So, but I do want to get into the rewards here because I know there's
Sure.
a digital version, and obviously you're in the States, right?
Yeah.
So you're in the States, so it's easy comic wise to get physical books in the States, but it's a pain in the ass to get books internationally. I'm
Correct.
sure you know it, and even though
Hmm.
I think either your first or second Kickstarter, international shipping is very difficult and
Yeah.
it's very expensive.
Hmm.
And that's why digital exists. And I know the digital is in color. Is there a black and white digital version too, or
Yes,
no?
there is. Yep, there'll be a black and white digital version. That was going to be on one of the once we hit 30 backers, everybody was going to get that asked for the color.
So obviously digital is super important. It'd be for a lot of reasons. Also, digital is cheaper.
Hmm.
Sometimes I can't afford to back a physical book, but I could afford $5-10 on a digital,
Yeah.
which is significantly less, especially when books are like 30-40 bucks. And on Kickstarter, I'm telling you, if your book's more than 20 or 25, I'm sorry,
Yeah.
I'm walking. I'm
I
walking.
hear you. I hear you there. I hear you 100%.
And then obviously there's the physical black and white book. And so that I think is pretty self-explanatory. And then we get into something fascinating. So what's the deal with the hardcover stuff? Because what's that about? Because that's also new to me in a lot of ways.
So, I've one of the actual other creators I've met, he had a printing area, um, and he asked if I could offer that when I was making if I could offer it on hardcover that he wants added to his collection. I'm like, how popular is that going to be for for a 32-page book for have a hardcover? And he's like, oh, it could be something different. I was like, okay, I guess I'll offer it. So that was more someone in particular made a request, and I offered it to them. So I wanted to offer it to as many people as I could.
So what is that even like? Because obviously it is interesting with a
Hmm.
32-page book. I mean, that's something that I really haven't heard of. I've heard of collector editions. I've heard of nicer quality. I've heard of almost museum. Obviously, I don't know if you're a big Zenoscope fan, but they have a showcase, which is
Okay.
on more like museum quality type paper on finer paper, grades out better.
Yeah.
As a comic, it's more likely to get a 9.8 and a 9.9. Um,
Mm.
and so obviously, and it's one of my favorite artists is Sunku Inaki, and I was waiting 6 months for the cover to drop. 6 months,
Wow.
really, really waiting. It
I
took
gotta take that one down. What was it?
Sunku Inaki. It's a showcase by her, but
Okay.
it waited 6 months for the book to drop, and I was waiting for it. It's a great book, but
Okay,
what
great.
is
I'll take
this
that
like?
one.
Because a hardcover is definitely more of a collector's item at this point. It's also going to last a lot longer. And so, what is that like to provide that because people collect comics, and then
Hmm.
also know that something is going to be put on a shelf and not in a bin, if that makes
That's
sense.
great, and that's what I'm hoping for, right? So I wrote volume one and volume two. So I originally wrote this cinematically. When I split it up, it ended up being volume one and volume two. After I make volume two, uh, I have a holder that got made that's gonna have both hardcovers that fit in it perfectly. Um, and that would be the collector for book one, for volume one and volume two. So each book will have a couple volumes in it. So that would be the collector item for a collector.
And so obviously, I'm assuming you're going to make those holders more in a package and figure out how to get all that stuff out there? Because I don't think you're offering it at the moment right now, right?
No, that would be for volume two.
So obviously that's cool. And then also there is the physical color side, which I think is self-explanatory. I think there's also a hardcover for the colored version as well.
Correct.
And so again, choices. I think it's pretty self-explanatory. These items.
Yeah, that's
At
right.
any point,
I tried to make it pretty straightforward.
and then obviously also there's a bunch of other stuff where there's the shirt, there's a face mask. Obviously, I think you can get your name etched into the book and an Easter egg as well
Yes.
somewhere, which is always fun. Easter eggs are fun in books.
Yeah.
And then also there's Mawu beads, and those are
Yes.
cool. I don't know if you know who O'Shea Edwards is, the wrestler.
Yeah, I do.
Oh, he's great. He's
I
great.
was
He's on my
I
show.
wasn't thinking. I wasn't even thinking of him when I saw those beats. But
He,
yeah,
he wears those, right?
yeah, you're right.
And then
So
he was on
so
my
those are
show.
going to be those will be carved in the phases of the moon, which is like the symbol of of the story. But those each one will be carved in the phase of the moon.
And so what is that like to offer that? Because obviously this is for now we're really tearing up. I mean, obviously
Yeah.
getting your book in your name in there and getting to be part of the book
Hmm.
is a big deal. And then also those Mawu beads or Mawu beads.
Yeah.
Correct me if I'm completely wrong
No, that's
here.
perfect. That's perfect.
Also,
Um.
two pieces of Kingdom, Oh Kingdom Come merch as well. And so now we're really tearing up into
Yeah.
the higher echelon for people who are true believers. Not no pun intended.
I like what you did there. No, it was great. I really wanted to offer even more, which was it was in one of the stretch goals, which I'm probably going to use around the same stretch goals for my next edition. But I wanted to work with local artists. I spoke to a couple people in Rwanda, but shipping that stuff that starts getting expensive. But you're allowed to make custom brand things. So that's like a little loophole you can use to make some African art. So the Maui beads would be from this artist in Rwanda, as well as in the stretch goal I had masks that were going to be that were exclusive to each kingdom. So a mask that wear, which is kind of like their special like Ombu Black Ops unit of each kingdom. They wear those African masks. So those are two things I really wanted to work with some local artists to get some of their local art out, and the Maui beads stuck perfectly. I even thought Maui beads after the character and decided to put them on the character afterwards. So that worked. That really lined up really perfectly.
Yeah, no, I like when merch makes sense.
Yeah.
I like when rewards make sense.
Hmm.
It's super important. It's really bad when a reward doesn't make sense. Now, obviously, prints, mini prints, all that stuff makes a lot of sense because
Yeah.
you have stuff on there, or even covers. I'm in the process of possibly booking an exclusive cover for my eBay store at the
Oh,
moment,
very cool.
and it's going to make sense with the character, and I'm probably
Yeah.
going to make a good fortune on it because it's going to make a lot of sense with it. But I'm not going to tell you what I'm doing exactly, how I'm doing it live.
Come
It's
on.
a surprise. It's a
Give it
shocking
up.
surprise for everybody. I have a bunch of things set up, and it's not even that expensive, all things considering.
That's
But,
awesome.
but it's the idea here that I like the fact that your merch makes sense with
Oh,
what
I
you're
appreciate that. Thank you. I was aiming for things I'd want. And this isn't to dig at other people. I don't really drink. I don't drink coffee or anything, so I wouldn't want a mug.
doing.
I would wear a shirt. The mask kind of makes sense now, but who knows at the end of the year if it will.
It's,
um,
it's probably going to make sense for a few more years,
okay.
honestly.
Okay, good. I was
I
concerned
think I
about that.
think it will. I think people, moving forward, I think collectively, and we're going to get into it in a second here.
Okay.
And we can talk about COVID in a second here, but I think it's
No.
going to make sense in the
Cool.
long run.
Very cool. But yeah, I wanted things that I would use. I'm very like particular about things. I'm pretty like minimal. So what are things that I would want to use myself? So okay, I'd wear a shirt, I'd wear a mask, and that would be just super cool. I would definitely want, especially if this is does as well as I want. I would definitely want my name etched somewhere in the book that was the first version of it. So those are the things that really stuck out to me.
Yeah, no. That absolutely makes sense, and it's super important to be what you want as rewards, because chances are the people who are backing, if you know how to run your Kickstarter correctly, you're aiming at your backers.
Yeah.
I have an idea of what my audience wants, or I have an idea of what the audience of the book I'm essentially booking a cover for wants. So
Hmm.
it's super, super interesting. And I just want to go through something really quick. Is that obviously you got some stretch goals, complete comic and shipped, character posters, release a motion comic, and those things are sort of interesting. Obviously, more masks, and then eventually possibly go in Hollywood. But
Yeah.
that's the big one, I think, going Hollywood.
It was the big one. Hail
So,
Mary.
so I'm not going to push you on any of the last one in particular, because obviously you got to see where your Kickstarter goes, and I think a motion comic is the starting point for that.
Hmm.
But
100%.
but who knows? Hollywood's running out of ideas as of lately.
That is for sure.
So
That is for sure.
but I don't want to get you or me blacklisted just yet. So clearly.
Okay.
Anyway, I do want to talk about Kickstarter though, because I know this is your first Kickstarter.
Yep.
And I know that, new, I know Kickstarter could be fun. It could be very intimidating.
Hmm.
A lot of people are helpful. A lot of people give bad advice. There's some gatekeepers out there, and then they're gatekeepers. And obviously, how has Kickstarter been for you,
It has
and
been
why Kickstarter?
interesting. It has been very interesting. I joined all the comic creator Facebook groups, even the one that I saw your podcast in, and
Which one was that?
I think it was Independent Creatives, Independent ICC.
Oh yeah,
Uh,
yeah, I'm an ICC.
yeah, yeah. So I saw it there, and then uh, and at least my experience so far, the other creators have been very responsive, like giving feedback on what you're doing, um, uh, and like kind of any question I had, they were pretty quick to answer. Because I was on the fence. Oh, what do you use? Do you use Kickstarter? Do you use Indiegogo? Do you use GoFundMe? But it seemed like for this, it's kind of like the premier version for crowdfunding, and I wanted to make sure I got as many eyes because it's less about I could have funded the whole the whole shebang, but I wanted to get as many eyes on it as possible.
So
So it was
let's even talk about that, because this is something that I'm curious about, because Kickstarter is a funnel. That's all Kickstarter is, and the rewards are an exit funnel, and then backer kit is an upsell.
yeah,
Once you understand it, it's funnelytics.
yeah,
I'm a big fan of ClickFunnels. Some people
okay.
love ClickFunnels, some people hate it. I have all four of Russell Brunson's books,
Oh wow,
and
okay,
not even expensive. They're $10 a pop. And the fourth
oh,
one was
okay.
100 a pop, but it was the One Click Funnel Challenge, and it's a super cool book. It's a secret book.
Oh
Um,
shit, I'm gonna
it's
write that one down.
and so a lot of what he talks about is how to build a funnel, and how to fill your funnel, how to market your funnel, headlines, and then actually how to traffic your funnel. And so I'm curious, because right now there are people in this, and this is inside baseball, who can't fund it all themselves, and there's people
Hmm.
who can fund it all themselves.
Yeah,
And obviously, I think you fit in the camp where you could fund it yourself, but Kickstarter is also a social platform. It's also an already built, funnel. It also is an
exactly.
already proven funnel working system slash business to some degree. And it
Yep.
also gives, a lot of, sort of, I guess, premiere. And that's what you're paying for on the back end for Kickstarter, is that it's a traffic driver. I sell on eBay, and I don't sell on Facebook groups, because eBay drives a lot of traffic.
Wow. Okay.
Great. And so I'll pay my 13% to eBay off of every single item, because I'm dealing with 350 million Americans.
That's
Or
right.
relatively, that's my audience. I don't know how many people are on eBay per se, but it's a lot more than me marketing and spending money on Facebook ads. So
That's right.
I am curious, on that realm for you, where it seems that it's almost a marketing play at this point.
100%. Yeah, and that's why I set the tier at that. It was important because I know if I'm going to do this, I got to do it full force. Like let me go into this and make the comments. The first one, like you said, and we were talking earlier about how well something could go or how wrong it could go, right? So it was important because I've gotten the most people out of networks that I'm not aware of. They're all new people. So that I would not have been able to reach if I had just funded my own comic and sold it off my site or sold it off Amazon or something, I would have been able to reach those people. And that's people that will expand to other people. Oh, hey, this book is really, as long as I did my work, this book's really good. You should check this out. Like you can't that's priceless to be able to reach a new audience that has an interest in something you're doing. Like it's almost impossible to put a price tag on that.
Yeah, and obviously, Kickstarter also has that prestige. It also has, and I'm doing a Kickstarter. I'm doing a comic on Kickstarter. Not to
Okay, cool.
say, not to say that funding it yourself has advantages. I know a few people who fund themselves, and they're funding it themselves not because they couldn't do it on Kickstarter, but because they have more advantages, and they also found a way how to make it even more profitable, where they've actually run the numbers. And then they also have built-in audiences, and they're also somewhat decent at marketing, where they figured out that the 8% or 9% or 10% Kickstarter charges, it's they can go spend that money. They can spend 8% on ads and do better, which is much applaud to them.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
But it's a very interesting sector right now, and it's also being very much battle tested right now after 2020.
Yep.
Keanu Reeves, Scott Snyder.
I saw that.
Because I'll give you a cool fact. Supposedly, and I don't know if it's true, and somebody told me who's prominent in it, said, hey, when Keanu Reeves and Scott Snyder all throughout 2020 were on Kickstarter, more projects got funded. The success rate was higher. And now the success rate is lower. Less projects are on, and less funding is actually achieving, which doesn't explain. I mean, it explains some things and it doesn't explain others, but I was under the impression it would be the opposite. And so obviously that raises a question, is Keanu Reeves and Scott Snyder good for Kickstarter? And that doesn't mean they don't have a right to do it. Does that mean Boom doesn't have a right to be on there? Of course Boom has the right to be on there. Both of those guys have a right to be on there. But it becomes an issue saying, wait a second, if a big name comes in, all ships rise with the tide. But then when that tide drops down, it becomes a problem again, where now less things get funded. And so it's a real issue.
And it's interesting because I did notice a change. Like, I definitely noticed, like, you can almost feel like there's been, because I was watching it for a couple of years before even considering this. And there was definitely a change when Keanu's novel dropped, for sure.
Because when Berserk came out, you might have backed Berserk, and you might have backed 15 other projects as you were on the site. And now that you don't have a reason, and this is something that I was talking about way before, and it's a real issue to business, meaning it's an abnormality in the business of Kickstarter. So I don't know what your thoughts are on that, or you want to pass, because I totally get why people pass on that.
Really interesting, because like,
because I'm interested because you're new to Kickstarter, and so obviously,
so it'd be hard for me to even feel what it was like before. Since I didn't run my campaign around that time, so I am curious. But I do feel like there was a higher success rate back then. And back then,
there's a lot more stuff coming out, and I didn't back Berserk. I didn't back Nocturna. I picked up Berserk. I picked up Nocturna in the comic shop realm. But it is super, super interesting with what's going on with it, and it's a real concern, and it's a real divide. And it's not an issue of whether they have a right to be on there or not, because of course they do. It's an issue of what does this exactly mean for Kickstarter, because, it changes things. It's an extra force on the Kickstarter, and the fact that we're in 2021 and now things are opening up. But even through the first 6 months, before things are opening up in America and sort of the world, I guess, a little bit, that success rate was down. And it goes to show, people say, oh, Keanu Reeves, somebody comes into Keanu Reeves, they're not backing my project. No, that's not true at all.
That's what, I would have to agree with that sentiment. I feel like the percentage,
they are backing your project that Keanu Reeves is running. So what do you mean? He's not taking air out of the room. He's putting air in. When his project leaves, that's what takes air out of the room. It's a problem.
So it's the lead. Yeah, you're right. So it's great when he's there, but he also causes a huge vacuum
And
right
so,
after.
and so it's a real issue because I think everybody's wrong. Where people are like saying, "Oh, he's not taking air because somebody's backing his project isn't backing mine," and that's not true at all. It's quite the opposite. So,
Yeah,
very interesting position.
that is
And
that's a you can teach a whole class on that. It's very
it's
complex.
super interesting, and
Yeah,
it should be the other way around. It doesn't make
yeah,
sense.
it's
But,
supposed to be.
but obviously, I don't want to push too hard into that either because I'm going to get in trouble. And there's a bunch of
No.
there's a bunch of people who've been on my show 4 or 5 times who completely disagree with that sentiment, and they're wrong.
No.
Statistically, they're wrong.
Yeah,
And so that's all
I
I'm
can
going to
see
say
that.
about that. And I
No, I
still
can
like
see
them.
that. Especially when you break it down that way. It's not even a matter of right or wrong, just logic. More eyes were on it, and when he's leave, a lot of those eyes left.
And so it's very 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 interesting. And all those eyes didn't leave immediately afterwards.
Yeah.
They left, in 3 or 4 months later, but they were
Hmm.
still active on Kickstarter. So super interesting. I would love to run that economic study. I think it'd be so much.
I'd love to see it.
I would love to. If somebody wants to write me a check to do it, I would happily.
Hey.
If Kickstarter wants to open up their backings and then let me in, oh man, I would love it. But obviously, I do want to talk about COVID because we mentioned the masks. So
Mhm.
obviously, we are turning. I like to believe the position on COVID. It's warmer outside. It's nice outside.
Mhm.
It's cool outside now. It's fun. I'm in Connecticut. I don't know where you
Oh,
are.
cool. My sister's in Connecticut.
It's nice. It's nice. I used to live in DC. I miss it. DC, it's like warm till October. It's
Oh
great.
man.
It gets warm in March and it's warm till October, and then
Yeah.
November it's like 65 degrees. It's fantastic.
Direct. That's
Oh,
all.
we go from 75 to like 65 to maybe 35 in February.
Whew.
It's great. It's
Yeah.
great. I love it.
This is
But
Florida.
not the point.
Yeah. We don't feel it in
Obviously,
Florida that much.
fair enough. Fair enough. Go enjoy the beach, will you? Um, anyway. Well, one of the things that I am curious is that, and I know that you haven't been to a con as a vendor per se. I'm
Not
gonna
yet.
take, I'm gonna take an assumption you've been a fan at
Oh,
convention,
I love. Oh my God. Yes.
and so where do you think everything is going? Because obviously, I think we're going back to normalcy. Now, I'll tell my opinion. I think that cons are going to be indefinitely changed for a variety of reasons. I think inflation is coming. I think that comic books are overpriced. I was supposed to have a guest on earlier, but we had to reschedule that. It's probably going to come out in maybe like 10 days. Me and
oh
him
man.
were talking about this on my other show. And books are very expensive right now at conventions, where an X-Men 1.0 is $2,000 when it used to be 1,200. And so I think books are overpriced. I also think that there's more venues for people to go out to. And I think also people are going to become very frugal. And also, I had a friend explain to me that a lot of people sort of had their list and that was all they were buying. And I'm the same way. And I'm in this business and I'm selling comics. So I completely understand that, you know, I have a list and I know what I'm buying and I'm not buying much else. So where
Yeah.
do you think all this is going and how do you think the comic world is going to change because of COVID?
I do think it's gonna be forever changed. I've not had the pleasure of experiencing Comic Con because even at Comic Con they even had media releases for movies coming out, right? All the big studios would come out for that. I did see maybe a shift would happen in that regard for IP. They'll probably do their own thing rather than all coming together at Comic Con. But I didn't I haven't experienced it to see what I do see the frugal statement. I mean, times have changed. Um, would you say it's like more like a convention and like whatever you see, like, oh, I'll grab that, I'll grab that. That's how it was before, correct?
Yeah, I think I always had a battle plan going into cons where I would have $1,000 or I would budget and I knew exactly where my money was going,
Yeah,
and I over budgeted purposely, meaning that I had $150 safety net built in,
yeah.
which is always nice too. And so my last con that I went to, I spent like $870. I walked, and then I had like $30 extra that I spent on sort of junk or
Okay.
$40 extra on junk that wasn't budgeted for, but I had a safety net in place, and I still was under 1,000, which was awesome. Um, And
That
so
was really good.
obviously, as an individual, I understand what I'm doing, but a lot of people don't do what I do.
I can
I'm
imagine.
of comic book investing. This
Yeah,
is sort of my side hustle that fuels, and it's just another way for me to. It's a revenue stream for me.
exactly. It's another
Um,
revenue stream.
and it's a science. So obviously, I am not the person to talk to about this because I have always been battle plan oriented with this, and I broke it down. But I've seen people just buy stupid shit, and they're happy. And I'm not going to tell somebody that, hey, if you got $500 and you see everything you want out of cancer, be my guest. But what my friend was telling me is that people are now not doing that the same way.
Mm. Everybody's becoming
Selective
selective.
is a good word to use, and they're not really saying, they're saying, okay, I need, Hulk 170 in my collection. It's not an expensive book, it's maybe a $10 book. Cool, I found it, got this. I need Static number 7, I need
Hmm.
Teen Titans number 39, and then they're not going and buying, saying, oh, this looks cool, this book over here. They're not buying hardware number
They're
5.
not trying it out. Wow.
And so now that could have just been that con was in Florida, and that con was one of the first cons that opened up, and people could have been testing the water.
True.
That could be the abnormal position, and obviously this is all anecdotal, but it's nonetheless if that's what it's going to look like. And I'm going to be speaking to a bunch of other friends and say, hey, can you give me like an update on how the buying spending habits were, just for my own personal position and my own personal knowledge.
Yeah.
Because if all of a sudden I could be completely wrong on this, but that's what he told me at this con, what was going on with people and what he witnessed. So obviously it's sort of where I think it's going. So I don't know where you view it going, or even what your sense of it, even just as a fan, because I'm curious.
Yeah. No, that's really interesting. I do agree. I'm really hoping. I suspect that everyone's going to be a little timid, and I'll probably compare it to flying. Everybody will be a little timid at first. Flights aren't going to completely fill up at first. People are going to, hold on to their cash. But I'm hoping maybe you said a couple of years, maybe
So
3.
I think the mask is going to be a couple of years. I think
Oh, you don't think this falls under that?
I think the concept is going to be about 18 months, because I think that we're going to have a market crash.
Wow.
So I think this is going to be in effect till 2023, late 2023. I think is going to when it's going to be really hitting hard, because it's evident to me with inflation that all of a sudden when inflation rises up, everything skyrockets price wise, and then all of a sudden all that has to come back down, and it's
Eventually.
painful, and then people aren't going to be spending. You're going to have a crash, and hopefully we won't have a crash. I mean, it's coming, no question about it. I mean, the signs are on the wall. And if you're blind as a bat, I wish I could be blind as you and keep believing. That's how I feel, and
Yeah.
I have good inclination. It's not coming yet, I can tell you that,
Hmm.
but it's coming, no question about it. And also, we just had a 12-year bull cycle.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, we just had a 12-year bull cycle in the stock market. So it's long overdue. And if you think COVID was a mini recession, it's not the full recession. It was a mini autocorrect because everything is back up and running as far as the stock market and even the comic market is concerned.
That's right.
But I digress, because that's not the real crash. And people think it is, it's not. I know this space so well.
Yeah, I can hear it. I can hear it. So, do you discuss this all the time? Do you even like?
I have an entire show.
Do you share this knowledge, sir?
I have an entire show about this.
Okay, you're gonna have to link us up after that.
So obviously there's a lot of stuff, and we are so off topic. So I'm gonna get us back onto topic. And obviously, I pushed you on a lot of stuff, and obviously you got the Kickstarter going on. So I do want to give you an opportunity to self-promote. So where can people find the Kickstarter? Where can people find you on social media? Obviously, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook pages, TikTok. I don't know, TikTok.
TikTok. Are the kids TikToking now? Everything's O Kingdom Come. Even if you search it and Kickstarter should be O Kingdom Come. There's a link on the website where you can read the first few pages of chapter 1. And it's all okingdomcome.com.
Yeah, go check it out because obviously I've been saying this over and over and over again. You have to support indie, and what that means is that you have to back Kickstarters. So obviously you have to back a Kickstarter. You're pledging $1 or pledging $500. Every little bit helps. So please go support indie content creators. I'm an indie content creator. Obviously support me, support your Kickstarters. And let's say you missed the Kickstarter and there's some extra books around and somebody has a web store, obviously buy from them. Let's say this book isn't your cup of tea, but somebody else has another book that they've done that's more your cup of tea. So I'm a big mecha fan, and there's plenty of people who do mecha series, and then they do like a jungle story. And I prefer to read the mecha thing, and so I won't back their Kickstarter, but I'll buy off of their web store. But seriously, back Kickstarters in all seriousness. If you really like what you hear, it is super, super important right now. But I will say this. I get it. COVID has wrecked people. COVID has put people under a lot of financial stress. It has put people in the hole. It has put people into debt. If you are in an economic stressful situation, you are in debt, please do not back a Kickstarter. Please do not back yourself. Please don't back me. Please don't buy me a coffee. Please take care of yourself. Make sure your rent's paid for, your mortgage is paid for, you got electricity, water, food, shelter. Make sure your spouse is good, your husband, wife, boyfriend, girlfriend. Make sure they're okay. Make sure you're okay. Make sure if you got kids, your kids are okay. You got a pet, make sure your pet's okay. And also make sure you're going to be fine for the next month. And I know, the black and white version is $20. But you know what is $20 can go a long way. If this is the difference between you eating and buying a comic book, please make sure you have food on your table. It is 100%. Super, super important in that regard. And if that's the case, then what you should be doing is you should be liking and following on social media for all your indie content creators. You should be sharing their content. You should be putting it out there. You should, hey, send me a message. Send, Charles a message. I'm going to get your name wrong. So
you did it. We made it.
So obviously send to, hey, I really like your work. It looks awesome. It goes a long way. Also, you never know who, because you share something, sees it. And it's happened live on my show where I've interviewed a bunch of people and they got like 4 or 5 backers directly because of me. And then those backers told me live on the Kickstarter of what's going on and why they backed the project. Hey, I just backed.
Oh, that's awesome.
So it does happen, and it does make a big difference. And you never know who is looking. And if you share something in a group that's not your Kickstarter, you never know. That person who's running that Kickstarter might not have shared it yet into that group, and it goes a long way because your friends might be into something like this. It's happened to me too, where people that were like, "Oh yeah, so this Kickstarter on your page, man," and I backed it. So it goes a long way. And
thank you for giving people the platform to do that as well.
So on that note, obviously, I'm going to give you the final word.
Thank you for having me on. Please check out O Kingdom Come. I think it's really interesting if you're into street pyramids, all that stuff. You like looking into the past. I think it's really interesting perspective on what could have happened to the great kingdom of Nubia. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Andrew. I appreciate you having me on.
Well, things go a long way. It says I'm already smiling. And on that note, I don't think I could have said it any better myself. So that's a wrap.